Hello there, it's Jo from Minerva, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a fitting video. We all make clothes for different reasons. Some of us make them because we're really interested in different prints and different fabrics. We love different patterns and different styles, but we also make our clothes so that they fit. If you've been making clothes and finding it difficult to fit them, or you're disappointed that when you cut out a pattern the pattern pieces aren't fitting your body shape, then you definitely need to learn some fitting techniques. The techniques that I talk about today are featured and given in more detail in the Figure Your Fit book. This book is a small booklet. It's 64 pages, it's not onerous, it's really good for reference material. So whatever you're making, if you're altering shoulders, bust, bicep, body length, crotch, leg, they're all in this book, and it gives you really simple ways to adapt patterns so that you can make them fit. This book is available on our website and is tagged below. I'm going to go through the trouser part of fitting today. So if you've not made trousers before because you're frightened you can't get them to fit properly, or you have made trousers before and you're really disappointed with the outcome, then take a look at some of today's fitting tips and tricks. It's a bare all video. I'm going to be showing how I fit trousers on myself so that you can use the techniques on your body shape. The pattern that will be referred to in today's video is Burda 7062. It's a really simple cigarette style pant. It can be long or ankle length. It doesn't have a waistband, and it's really simple to fit because it doesn't have a fly or a yoke or pockets. You can just concentrate on getting the fit of the trousers really good for your body. If you've not made trousers at all, ever, then I suggest you make a pair of pyjama bottoms so that you can think about what fits for you, where you get a tighter bit, where you get a bigger bit, where you get drag lines, where it feels too restrictive, and that way it'll give you a little insight into trouser making. When you're making a close fit pair of trousers, the fabric is really key. So the fabric that I'll be using to make these trousers is a stretch crepe. So already I know I've got an element of stretch on the length grain. So when I cut my fabric, I'll know that I'll have a little bit more ease around the hips and waist and thighs. If you're using a really stable fabric, then when you fit your pattern to yourself, you won't have that element of ease. So you'll need to make sure that you're giving yourself plenty in the seam allowance so that you can adjust your pattern. You're going to see different parts of me, sometimes my face, sometimes not my face, because we're going to be concentrating on measuring parts of our body below the waist, so you might not see my head. So the first thing you do when you get a trouser pattern is you'll need to find your waist and your hip measurement. Waist measurements aren't just one simple measurement. You'll have your high waist, and then you will have your natural or low waist, which is a little bit further down. So your high waist is right in a softish part here, and your low waist is on top of your hip bones. Some people have a wider waist measurement to a hip measurement. If you're slim in the hips here, you might have more of a sort of triangle shape. Some people have quite a rectangle shape, so they've got the same size here as here. So it really doesn't matter what shape you are. It's about making a pair of trousers that fit you. It can be tricky to take a waist measurement unless you really know where your waist is. And how you're going to do that when you're making trousers is to get a piece of elastic and tie it around your waist. And when you tie the elastic around your waist, that is the natural place at where you would wear your pyjamas, your trousers, or your skirts. And there's no point putting it in a place and deciding that's where you'd like it. You've got to sort of move around and find out where your natural waistline sits. Some people's are sometimes not perpendicular to the floor, so you might have a shape like that if you've got a flatter stomach. You might have it over, you might have it lower at the back. So don't think there's a right or a wrong way. Find out where your piece of elastic sits. That is where you take a waist measurement. Next, you're going to take a hip measurement, so that's around your widest part, So I would say I'm going back in there, so that would be my widest part. It's taking in the widest part of my bottom, but you'll need to find where that is on you. Depends how much tummy room you're using, how much bottom room you're using. So try and find the widest part. You could write that down. From those two measurements, you choose a size from the pattern to cut. Another size that you might want is your crotch measurement, and that goes from the back waistband to the front waistband, and you can take a full measurement. You'll learn today how to make this a little bit more specific, because of course if you've got a flat bottom, then you'll have of your overall crotch measurement a smaller amount. If you've got a larger tummy, you'll be taking a larger amount. If you've got a bigger bottom, so those two aren't equal, they might be different, and you'll need to distribute your front and back crotch through your overall crotch length. You also need to make sure that when you sit down that you'll have enough ease in your trousers. You're going to learn a technique now called tissue fitting. So I've cut out the front and back trouser piece using my measurements that I just took, and I've drawn on the pattern piece the seam allowance, and the seam allowance on this pattern is 1.5 centimeters. So I know that the distance that my body is going to be fulfilling is between that seam line and that seam line. It's not to the edges. So I've marked on the seam allowance all the way around, and under the crotch seam I've just snipped the pattern to the seam line so that when I try it on I'm getting a good indication of the sizing around the crotch. I've put in the darts with pins. I've used really small dressmaking pins. If you use big pins with a glass head on, they're a bit large for tissue fitting, so I just use small dressmakers pins. And I've also put the pleat in the front. There are some useful markings on a pattern. This is the hip notch, so when I tissue fit this on myself, I'll be looking to see if that's hitting the widest part of my body. Also, I'm really short. I'm not short in the leg, I'm short in the body. So depending on whether you're tall or short, you might need to use these lengthen or shorten lines. So when you make a pair of trousers, don't just make them and think, I'll chop the bottoms off and make them shorter here, because actually you will have moved the place where the kneecap has the most ease. So try on the tissue fit. You might need to lengthen it from here, depending on if you've got a long shin. You might need to lengthen it from here, depending if you've got a long thigh bone. Or if it's just an inch, then you can probably alter it from the bottom. But the tissue fit will tell you all of these things, and all of these things will help you to get good fitting trousers if you do it before you cut out the fabric. Okay, when you tissue fit, keep the elastic on your waist, because that's a really good indicator of whether this pattern will fit around your waist. So when I put the one trouser leg on, the first thing I'm going to match up is the centre front line. So I've matched up the centre front line and it is not meeting my waist. So I need to add some fabric on here, because not only is the tissue not even meeting the elastic, the seam line is quite low. So I can have it there, I can have it just fitting below my natural waistline, or if I want it to come up further, I can come up further. So that's a choice for me. I've got the pleat here. I want to make sure that that centre seam is running down the centre of my leg. I can pin up the sides. It is useful if you have somebody else so that you don't split your tissue. You get a good idea. These hip notches that we talked about, mine don't meet, so I won't have enough hip room if I made this pair of trousers. I'm also going to match the front centre seam and the back centre seam, and I also can see that that's not meeting the piece of elastic. So I'm going to need to add a little bit to the crotch length. I can double check the crotch length by taking my crotch measurement and seeing if I've got the overall measurement of 28 inches or if I need to add a little bit more, and where I need to add it. Do I need to add it at the front or do I need to add it at the back? Try not to, when you make pattern adjustments, try not to add to the centre front or the centre back paper pieces. You fit from the centre out. So if I want to add anything to this pattern, I'm going to add it to the side seam. If I've got quite a big bottom, then I might want my back piece to be larger and my front piece not to have changed. If I'm using up some space here for a fuller tummy and I've got a flatter bottom, then I might need to make the front piece bigger and change the back piece. So you don't necessarily have to have those equal, but that line that's running down the side of my body needs to be perpendicular to the floor. I don't want that swinging forward or swinging back. I want that to go straight down. I'm going to pin up the rest of the leg to see if I can keep that side seam straight. So what have I found out? I'm going to add 1 inch to the centre front seam, braiding out, because both of my side seams are meeting under that piece of elastic. I'm going to put a wedge in here. I often do a sway back adjustment, so I'm going to make an adjustment for the back. I could, you only need darts if they are needed, so I could take that out and eliminate that dart altogether. And the lower leg goes around my thigh. It's just at that hip point I'm not getting enough room of fabric here, so I'm going to add a little bit of tissue and I'm going to retry the trousers. Okay, this is the hip notch. I marked my pattern piece here because here was my thigh and here was okay. So from here up, I need more fabric. Now, I can make it quite big because I'm still fitting at this stage. So I'm just going to follow the curve of the hip and join it back into here. I need to add on my seam line. I'm going to continue with 1.5. You can add a bigger seam allowance. Some people add an inch, a sort of just in case inch, and then they use that inch for fitting. I'm going to keep it 1.5 because that's what I always remember when I'm at the machine. So this is my new pattern piece and I don't trust it yet. I'm going to refit it again. So this was where I didn't have enough room and my fabric didn't meet. I'm going to add a little bit to the back as well because I haven't decided yet whether I really need this space on the front or the back. When you're altering pattern tissue pieces, you can use your original pieces or of course you can trace a whole new set off. I like to keep all my alterations on one side. I like to keep it all on the right side, and when I turn the pattern over I can iron the back and I won't get ink off the pattern on my iron and I won't melt any tape that I've used. So I'm going to add another piece of tape here. This is a surgical tape, which is good because I can tear it off with my fingers. And I'm aware where this hip notch is again because I want it to match up to the other hip notch. And I'm also looking for that area here where I want to start grading out from. I think I needed more space for my tummy than I did for my bottom. And now I'm going to add that little bit to the back to make it meet my elastic band. And I'm going to add a little wedge to the front where I was a bit short on the band. Okay, I've made my alterations. You can see the first one has put that wedge back in that I had missing there. So I've put a piece of paper in here so that it grades out to the side. I've got both of my sides to meet now, and I'm matching the hip notches. Can you see that hip notches coming around here and around here? So I can pin those together. I've actually decided to take the dart out altogether. Darts indicate where part of the body goes in, and so actually if that dart, when that dart's in, it's pulling too much from my waist side seam. So my waist obviously doesn't go in enough to warrant having a dart, so I've taken it out completely. I've still got my centre line, I've still got my back centre line. All of my back pieces are meeting the waistband. You might remember we took a crotch measurement, so I'm going to double check that because this is the crotch adjusting line here. It will change my waist a little bit, of course, but that is only just meeting my elastic. I can afford a little bit more there. So you measure to the seam line, not to the edge of the paper. And I'm going to measure this crotch measurement. It's sort of going to be within half an inch. So I've got 10 3/4 inches. That's on the front. And I've got 15.5 inches on the back. So overall I've got 26.25 inches. When I measure myself, I was 28. I'm just going to double check. So I need to just add a little bit to my crotch. Now, do I need to add it to the front pant or to the back pant? So I'm going to do a front and back measurement, slightly off the camera. Not massively attractive way to show measuring. 13.25 for the front and 15.5 for the back. So it won't surprise you to know it's sort of confirming what we found out from the tissue fit, which is it's still not long enough at the front. So I need at least 13 inches at the front, and I'm only getting 11.5. 10.5, 11. So I can afford to add some more to the top of my waist if I want to, or I can add some more along this lengthen and shorten line. And I don't want to square off my waist too much, so I'm going to add an inch here. Because I've changed this piece, then I need to look at the facing piece that's going to go on it. So whenever you make any changes to any pattern, top or bottoms, you need to make sure that all the pieces that fit onto it are altered as well. So this is the centre back seam. When I line that up with the centre back, of course, I added some to the hip width. So I'm going to add some to the facing width. I've closed the dart to give me a true representation of that seam line. Got a little bit of squaring off to do on that corner there. Looks a little bit short. I'll fix that in a minute. So now my back facing is the same width as my trousers. So that's all correct. For the front facing, when I put the centre front seam on the centre front, if I left the facing intact, then I would have a very different shaped facing to the waist. Because I changed the shape of the waist, I really squared it off to get full tummy coverage, and I let the dart out, so I have changed the shape of it. So I've cut the pattern near the dart, and this time, rather than just adding to the end, because that's not more of the shape that I need, I'm going to add to the centre. I'm going to square that off and tidy that up so that I have a smooth line. I can use my curve, but I've just got the distance there that I needed to add. After your final tissue fit, when you think you've got everything just as you want it, then it's time to just pay a little bit of attention just to the pattern itself. So you need to make sure that all of your pieces will fit together when you cut them out in fabric. So this is my hip notch. So I'm going to match the hip notch up and make sure that the waistlines meet at the top. I'm a little bit short there. So, but it's only by a tiny bit, enough for me to ease that in with fabric, so then I'll get a nice curve on my hip, a little bit of fullness on my hip. The length and shorten lines are matching here, so I know I haven't skewed the pattern too much, and my side seams are matching here. The next thing to do is to check all your flow on your patterns. So I had a little bit of paper just sticking out there, so I've just smoothed that crotch line back out. I haven't taken any off here because that's part of my measurement. I just had a little bit of white paper sticking out there. I've done the same on that side, made sure that's nice and smooth. There is something I can't just smooth off, and that is where my seam lines meet. So I need to do a little technique called squaring off. Squaring off is where you make sure that the seam allowances have a right angle in them and they are squared off. So at the top of the crotch here and the waistline, where I popped the piece of tissue under, it wasn't very accurate, and you could say, oh well, that's just the paper piece. But if I cut this out of fabric and this is dipping down, then my side seam will dip down. If it's pointing up, then my side seam would point up. So I need to make sure that this is square on this corner. And how you do this is you find the edge of your pattern, and then you're going to draw a little square in that corner. And because we've got a 1.5 seam allowance, then the square needs to be 1.5. I'll do it in a thicker pen in a minute when I've worked out where it is. So this is the top of the waistline. This is the side seam, and in here I've got a square that's 1.5. So now I can cut that off and blend it in. And I know that that will now fit onto the crotch seam, and I won't have a little peak at the centre front, or I won't have a dip on my centre front. I need to do that on the side seams as well. So I'm going to make sure that I square off all of my seam allowances. You can also use a set square to check that you're using right angles in your corner. If you want to, you can double check now that all your seam allowances are 1.5. So now this would go to here. So all this is your seam allowance. I need to change that as well so that I know where my seam allowances are. This is the extra piece we put on the front panel. Okay, here are the trousers finished. Really good fit. My side seams are running down the side. My facing isn't rolling out to the front because I understitched it. Got a really smooth side zip. Nice fit on the back. Nothing too baggy here or pulling under my crotch. So if you've got this problem, then that's a different fitting issue to sort out. And the pleats down the front. A really great pair of work trousers. I hope that's given you some starter pointers for learning to fit trousers. Think about your waist, your natural waistline, your lower waistline, your hip line, whether you need more coverage for the back or the front crotch, your overall crotch measurement, what fabric you're using so you'll know how much ease you're going to get. Think about your leg length. Do you need to change the leg length at the thigh or at the shin, above or below the knee? And also, I hope that just having a go will help you to improve your trouser fitting or even get you to your first pair of trousers. If you are going to make a pair of trousers, try and pick something simple. The pattern I've used today is Burda 7062, a real simple trouser fitting pattern. It's just got a couple of darts and facings, so there's no tricky fastenings or buttons or a fly front. Of course, you've done tissue fitting, then you will cut out your fabric and you can make up your trousers and you can tack the side seams and you can really hone your fit along your hips. Try not to change the centre front line or the centre back line because that will knock your trousers off balance. If you want to see how these trousers work out in the end, then you can check out the sew along for this pattern. So Burda 7062 has a sew along that goes along with it, so you can go and check that out, and then maybe it will help you to get to your first pair of trousers. This fitting video would be really helpful if you're going to follow the sew along. In the Figure Your Fit book, from page 50 onwards, there is trouser fitting. Gives you lots of details for taking your measurements, crotch adjustments, really good ones that show you a problem. So if you're getting wrinkles in a particular place, it tells you the solution. So the illustrations are really simple but really easy to use. It shows you how to change crotch depth, crotch length, a curved crotch, finding a different crotch point, and changing for a larger waist, which is what I did today. This booklet is listed below. If you've made a super pair of trousers, we would love to see them. So please make an account with us at Minerva, post up your makes, give us a little description of what you've made and how you made it, and we can all share the love of your project in our sewing community. Thank you very much for watching. Do call again soon.